Welcome back to the Tangent. We're back again for the tournament. We are in the final four. Back here with everybody who was here before, the same 5 people. So we're gonna jump right in, and we're gonna start with a battle that I think is gonna be one of the best discussions we have in this for this whole tournament. We're gonna do Breath of the Wild versus Red Dead. Now the group here has decided that Breath of the Wild is probably one of the best games ever made. It has its flaws. We all know that.
It was a unanimous decision in the last round. That's relevant.
It has its flaws, but I am going to fight for Red Dead because Red Dead was a very innovative game for what it was.
That's your problem, for what it was.
Yeah, well, you know.
And the thing is, it did draw a lot of inspiration from a lot of things that came before in its particular style.
True.
And we I don't know if we went over this on podcast or if this was after. The left side of our current bracket is open world games that are very different from each other, and the right side of the bracket is
RPG,
sort of
action adventure. I think
action adventure kind of that are also rather different from each other. But in terms of open world games, when people thought about open world games like 10 years ago, Red Dead Redemption was really the kind of game that people were thinking about. So, I mean, yeah, it changed some stuff, but it is still very squarely within its category.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I when I say innovative, I just really mean that it took what everybody loved about Grand Theft Auto games, San Andreas, Vice City, Grand Theft Auto 3. It took what was very good about those games and turned them into the Wild West, which, as I said in the last episode, one of my favorite genres. If I were to live in the past, that's where I'd want to live. I would want to be a gunslinger. I don't know why. Just one of those things. But being able to be a gunslinger in a virtual world where I really don't die from being shot at is amazing to me. It was always one of those things that it made it very fun to go through and decide whether you could be a good guy or a bad guy. Because even in the first Red Dead, and we'll talk about the second Red Dead for a second, you had your choices to make throughout the game that could push you down the bandit path or down the good guy path. And depending on which way you went would depend upon how, not the story itself, but just how you interacted within the world. Because if you were a bandit, you could barely walk into a city without being shot at by the sheriff. But if you're a good guy, you can walk anywhere you want and do what you want. And everybody would be like, hey, how's it going? What's up? And they're willing to help you. So you had to make that decision as you're going through it. The story itself kind of puts you in a situation where you had to go down the bad guy path because that's just where the story wanted you to go, because you are still part of a gang, and you had to do some bad things to get the good outcome.
Yeah, but even in terms of that particular system, the sort of reputation system, a lot of games have done that, and even some open world games have done it. Like,
right.
I think it was Grand Theft Auto Vice City that was the first time I really noticed it. Where if you made the gangs angry enough, certain gangs would just start shooting at you.
Even in GTA 3, I remember very close to your initial spawn point. It was called a Banshee, which was basically the Viper of the game.
Yeah.
And right around there was your Godfather type mafia.
Yeah.
And if
that's where the Italian mob was.
Yep. And if you ticked them off enough, you had to get in and get out to go get that Banshee anytime you wanted it.
Yeah.
Like a bat out of hell.
Because the Banshee was extremely fast, but it was extremely fragile.
Yep.
And some of those mafia guys had shotguns on them.
Oh, yeah.
And if they got one good square hit on you, you blew up.
And it was a fan favorite car. I went down there a lot.
That was, if I remember correctly, that particular thing with the Mafia not liking you was storyline related. After you got off of the first island, all the Mafia didn't like you, and that was just sort of ingrained in there. I think So I don't remember if it was like Vice City, where like if you went and like killed enough of the Haitians or killed enough of whatever, then eventually when they saw you, they would just start shooting at you. I don't remember if that was a thing in GTA 3, but it was definitely a thing in Vice City, which was the game right after it. And that was quite a while before Red Dead was a thing. But you also got, things like that in the other GTAs.
Yeah.
And then you got
San
Reputation.
Andreas.
Yeah.
They had the gangs in San Andreas.
And you started off with well, I can't remember their name, but they were the Purple Gang. They already didn't like you.
Yeah, they were like your rival gang.
Yeah, that was your initial rival gang. But you could tick off your own gang enough that they would start shooting at you.
Yeah. Did that on occasion, but then I would never hit a save point after that and just have to go back.
Right.
I just do that for fun, though.
But, there are other reputation games, reputation systems in other games.
You're right.
Again, for Fable was a big one that tried to revolutionize the whole thing, but I mean, they never were as well implemented as they always said they were.
Again, though, for me, Red Dead was all about being in the Wild West, being a gunslinger, being holding a 6-shooter on your side with a repeater on your back, which again we'll go back to putting weapons on your back and how inefficient that is.
Again, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you just want to store it out of your way, it's fine.
Well, he rode a horse everywhere, and you would run into stagecoaches that were being robbed, so you had your choice to save them or just move on.
Yeah.
Now that didn't ever hurt your reputation if you moved on, but if you went and saved them, it helped your reputation. It made you, the good guy. Saving people randomly on the side of the road, or going after the gangs that were at the time tormenting cities or towns, or even just random people that you run into. If you save them, it helped your reputation in a good way. But this is more in the second one than the first one, but you could literally go rob stagecoaches or rob people on the road, and that obviously hurts you. Or you could walk in and just pull your gun on the bank and say, give me your money.
I think the main draw that made a lot of people really like Red Dead isn't so much the reputation system or even necessarily the open world. I think that because video games are kind of like they've kind of superseded movies as like the new and awesome entertainment thing.
Right.
And when movies were big, you had a lot of westerns because we're in America. That's part of our history. That's what a lot of people like, getting into. This is the Western video game. So it's kind of like, it's like the Western movies of old, but for a new generation.
I was actually going to touch on that. I think, obviously some people are going to just think, Red Dead Redemption is like Cowboy GTA. But I think that's what makes it, like, what sets it apart is the fact that the genre change and the subject change makes it a little bit more appealing to me. Maybe not everybody's thinking that way, but, like, I like the West kind of, the wild, old days West kind of subject a little bit more than I do the GTA kind of subject, and it makes it a more appealing game to me because you don't have very many Wild West or cowboy style video games.
You're right, there are. I think I can
stands
count them
out,
on one
and
hand.
I also something I noticed that this bracket is very much dominated by the later years of the decade, and Red Dead Redemption is the first year of this bracket, and it's probably the oldest. It's still kicking. It's the oldest game. Other than Skyrim, I think it had the best chance to go very far in this from, the early part of the decade, and that just goes to show how good of a game it is, because it's no secret that as time is going on, the features that are added to video games are getting more and more, I guess, amazing, or more and more, like, appealing, because now you talk about a feature in God of War of the fact that there is 0 camera cuts unless you die in that whole game, and like those features are gonna kind of tip the scales more in their favor, but it kind of goes to show how great of a game that Red Dead Redemption is that it's still alive in this tournament for the fact that it's the oldest game in the tournament.
Considering like what God of War beat out Skyrim.
Exactly.
Upset's the word you want there.
Yeah,
Skyrim.
definitely. And then Sekiro upset Overwatch. So I mean,
I think that's entirely just this group, though.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think
a different group. This bracket would end up in a very different way.
Yeah, you're right. So,
like if we were everyone in here, except maybe Harrison, if we were like 10 years younger, this bracket would have ended up much different.
yeah, I think Fortnite.
Like if
Fortnite
Harrison,
would
if
definitely
Harrison
be in
was the
there.
oldest person in this room, this bracket would look nothing like it does right now.
Yeah, I think Fortnite would have made
boomer.
it further. Fortnite would have actually made it in the bracket instead of an honorable mention. Skyrim might have moved forward. Definitely Overwatch would have moved forward.
I didn't pick any of those, by the way.
We are.
Yeah.
You're right, Harris. But again,
that's because you're the old young.
you're within that age bracket that games are a little more appealing in a certain way now to you because you're out of high school and you actually don't have as much time like the rest of us to sit and play a game. Like for us, it's like we fight. I don't know if anybody else in this room, but I'm pretty sure we all do. We fight to find times to play games. We love playing games.
I
Don't get me
stayed up
wrong.
until 3 in the morning last night just so I can play the Fallen Order.
Yeah, I mean there are times when even when I do have time to play video games, I just don't.
Right.
Yeah.
I had plenty of time to play
Like,
video games over
a
this
game
past
has
week.
to be good for you to
Right.
for you to take your time to do it because I mean I only have good memories of like whenever I was a kid and I had like for all the time in the world to play video games. It just kind of happened that I enjoyed all the ones that I played for the most part. I'm not a very cynical person. I enjoy I would say I enjoy like 95% of the games that I actually took the time to play, but maybe that's just because I know myself better and I know what I'm gonna enjoy. I don't know what point I was going for with that.
We never know
that
what points
brings
when
in
we talk.
the unnecessary tangent of today.
I'm not sure we ever have a point.
Yeah.
So
since we spent this entire time talking about Red Dead, should we talk about Breath of the Wild?
yeah, I was gonna get there. I was gonna move in there for a second. Breath of the Wild to me was not a game that I. Okay, so I only played maybe 45 minutes total of that game, but I watched somebody play a lot of that game. I don't think there's too many people in this room that have actually played through the whole game.
Except Harrison.
Have you,
I've
Harrison?
beaten it twice.
Harrison went through it twice, so Harrison's a little more into it. But I mean, truthfully, the game itself, the graphically, story-driven, very open worlds where you can run around and do what you want. You could get lost in the world just solving the puzzles for the little temples that you run across. You could get lost completely in that game and not even progress in the story whatsoever.
The thing is that always felt really Zelda to me, because pick a Zelda game, and if it was one of the main games, you could get lost in it and pretty much end up doing nothing for just hours.
Oh yeah.
Like I didn't even know, like when I first started playing any of the Zelda games when I was a little kid,
A wee lad.
and I got into, I started talking to people who were like super into Zelda, but I just sort of like played it casually, and they told me there were dungeons. I didn't really think about it. Like I was just like, dungeons? Well, I mean, I guess there are, but I didn't know they had names or that they had like real points. I was just like, I thought it was just an exploration game that would just run around and find stuff.
Well, I mean, if you play Breath of the Wild, you can actually make it that. You could just explore. You could level up your character highly and not even progress in the story. You could just go do temples to a certain point. I mean, there is a point that you almost have to progress certain parts of the story to get more, but you can just run around the whole area and just do those puzzle temples and get orbs and upgrade your character, and you not even have to go to the next section where you need to be.
Well, compared to other Zelda games at all. Generally speaking, those little temple things were kind of shitty compared to like other dungeons that were in like for Ocarina of Time. Those dungeons were like way more complex, where those little temple things will take you like 2 minutes, 5 minutes maybe, and they're all just like based off of one little thing.
Yeah, it's a puzzle. It's a small puzzle. It's a very mini puzzle. Now, there were some puzzles within there from what I remember watching. Now, for me, I probably would not have made it as far as they did because me and my puzzle solving skills aren't the greatest, but it did take them a while to finish a puzzle sometimes. Very rarely they would find, a puzzle that just stumped them for a second. Or it was a skill-based puzzle where you had to use timing and certain skills that Link was given to get through the temple. I mean, and sometimes skill-based makes it even harder. I mean, because if you're just used to using certain skills that you're given to do things, you're done and it's over with. But this actually had some that were skill-based, so you had to, on top of using the skills, you had to use timing and the abilities and everything else to get through a small temple. Those did take a little longer, but you're right. I think 5 minutes, 10 minutes max per temple. But again, you were able to explore, find these temples and go do that. And that's how you upgraded your character.
Content like that is something that's super important to an open world game, in my opinion. Like for me, if there's meat and potatoes in front of me, that's what I'm gonna focus on and what I'm gonna enjoy. So like if I'm playing an open world game, the side questing and the exploration stuff has to be pretty fun and doable and plenty for me to kind of not just run through the main story of the game and forget about that stuff. Because if I go and eat my meat and potatoes first, finish the story of the game, enjoy that, I'm not going to have as much want in me to go back and play through the side questing parts of the game. So like an example of an open world game where they did that really well was the Spider-Man game that came out last year.
Right.
I spent like a really long time before I even got very far into the story at all, just going around and like collecting and enjoying the open world aspect of the game.
But that was just like Skyrim in that sense. I mean,
I didn't want to bring up the fact that he voted God of War over Skyrim after hearing him talk like that.
Yeah.
But that's what Skyrim did better than any game that's ever made, in my opinion, because you get so lost on all of the side dungeons and almost all of them have a story to go with them.
Well, all right, now don't get it twisted. Though. What I'm saying is,
I mean, we are where we are.
In
we
an
can't go back.
open world game, that's what I need for me to enjoy the open world game.
It depends on what kind of
content. But
content.
that's not gonna make me choose it over a different, because that's not really my type of game either way.
It depends on what kind of content is your side content. So like, I didn't get into Skyrim or its main content or side content, but like with the new Pokemon games, its side content is just wander around in the wildlands and go do raids and catch Pokemon. I get stuck on that for hours and hours and hours.
The new Pokemon game,
because
they give it to you like right at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, and that's the kind of side content I like. Is I want to go catch more Pokemon. I want to go do that.
Yeah.
So I think that'll segue great into what I was just considering when it comes to, open world games and the things that you find. They need to be engaging and rewarding. Those are the two things I'm looking for.
Yes.
I need them to pull my attention, and then after I complete them in hopefully more than just 10 minutes, it'll feel like I accomplished something. And that is one of the things that I'm going to knock against Red Dead, because we'll say the stagecoach. Okay, I saved him. Cool. I got a mark on my reputation. Moving on with my gameplay. Okay. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, I just happened to find this little mini dungeon that's going to give me something tangible at the end of it. Yeah. Also, since Breath of the Wild is a Legend of Zelda game, it's an open world Legend of Zelda game. Nobody knew what they were expecting when they got into it, and I think that's one of the reasons it got heralded in its year as well as it did. Whereas, I'm going to say a knock for Red Dead Redemption. When it came out, it was, it's just an Old West GTA, which, don't get me wrong, that's what it is.
Right.
But if that's what you want, then that's what you're going to get, and it's going to be great.
Now,
yeah.
I'm not much of a Zelda connoisseur. I do know the games. I've played through some of the older games on the NES. But is this the first open world?
Truly, yes.
Since the first one, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you consider an open world.
Well, here's the thing. When it comes to progression through the game, I would say that the very first one is the closest thing to open world. There's no hand holding. There's no numbering of dungeons. There's no being taken on a tour is the best way to put it.
A Link to the Past is kind of like that too.
They're literally numbered in A Link to the Past.
Technically, they are, but you don't have to do them in that order.
It behooves you to do so, and it
definitely does.
And it suggests that you do so, and that's the important part. There's no suggestion here.
Yeah, that could be seen as a problem, though. Like, for example, I kind of think that if you compare Red Dead to Breath of the Wild, I think Red Dead's story didn't suffer as much as Breath of the Wild's did because there was a little bit more guidance in Red Dead.
I will give you that Red Dead had more of a story than Breath of the Wild did, because Breath of the Wild isn't that kind of a game.
Yeah,
but I will also say that guidance isn't necessarily something that you always need, because going back to kind of what Nick said and going into a different style of game, like Super Metroid is set up so that you collect items in a certain order that they want you to collect items in. But if you watch a lot of the more experienced players or speedrunners, that is not the order that they collect things in, because that's not the optimal order. They've discovered optimal orders that are not the intended order. So sometimes doing the things that the developer intended for you to do at the time they intended for you to do it is not the best way to go about things. So being able to explore it yourself and go around and just do whatever the heck you want can be a good thing.
On that same note, just a note of exploratory and not really hand-holding. When you watch people doing efficient runs of, I'm just going to throw Ocarina of Time out here, there's the fire dungeon, where if you don't find a way to get the fire tunic before going into it, you're constantly taking fire damage just while you're in the dungeon.
Right.
But that doesn't stop infinite number of people from doing it exactly that way, because it's too inefficient to go and get the fire tunic. And first time I actually played the game, I did not find it, not because of inefficiency, but because I just didn't find it. But that didn't stop me from trying to do that fire temple for weeks before hearing from a friend, like, well, why aren't you wearing the red tunic? And I said, what?
The what now?
So then I had to go explore and find it, and
Right.
then I kind of had that, there we go
and that's
moment,
the
you
one
know?
thing about Breath of the Wild, though, too, that I've noticed is that the weather and the elements that you're in can affect your character, which was kind of cool to me, because it was like one of those things that I've never had to deal with. And obviously, since you've played other games like that,
Nintendo
I freaked out when I got struck by lightning the first time. I was
yeah,
like,
you get struck by lightning if you're holding
Right.
a metal weapon. You can freeze to death if you're up in the mountains and you don't have the right clothing on, or if you're going through the volcano area and you don't have fire resistant clothing, you can take damage. They give you clothing. Go ahead.
So a lot of what I'm hearing is also true in Breath of the Wild. Weather is a factor.
That's what I'm saying.
And
in
you
Breath
can
of the
control
Wild.
the outcomes. So
Yeah.
So let's kind of get back on track and compare these two. What's going to put one game over the other in this aspect?
Favoritism.
I really think it's
Let's be honest here.
I'm trying to find something objective, because like I said in the last probably few episodes, I'm not a Legend of Zelda guy, but I do appreciate Legend of Zelda, and I do appreciate Nintendo for things they do. But like I said, I've always been a Metroid guy. But Metroid, and especially the early Legend of Zeldas, had a lot of similarities. It's just, like the first Legend of Zelda and the first Metroid were similar in how you explored. It's just one was 2D and one was overhead. But I'm trying to find just some kind of objective measure that we can start to put up against each other. But like I said, these are two open world games that are nothing like each other.
right.
I will say that I have found at least some kind of, straw or tipping point. There is something that I have that will make my decision on the two, and we can either go over that now or whenever you want to take a vote.
I'd say go over it, because
Okay, so something that I brought up before, the both as a point against it and for it, is that Red Dead is just a GTA with an Old West skin.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that's both a for it and against it.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Nobody's disagreeing with that.
My point is going to be towards Zelda, though, for the fact that they took an old formula that was getting stale, and they just revamped it. And not only did it work, but it worked to positive criticism ubiquitously.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it feels like they're starting something new,
Zelda's
and it works so well.
Zelda's kind of known for that, because when they would hit new systems, so like when you got from Nintendo to Super Nintendo, Link to the Past was similar, but it had quite a few changes. But especially when you jumped to like the N64 and Ocarina of Time, that was a vastly different game, and they basically reinvented Zelda.
Without starting a whole new podcast, I'm gonna disagree with you and say that they tried to stick to it to negative results. Not that doesn't make it one of my favorite games in the world.
I will say this: yes, they did try and hang on to things that they should have let go. But when you jump, system to system, and you continue on, basically when we arrive here at Breath of the Wild, we have taken those evolutions from one system and them trying to pull the game forward, and unlike Skyward Sword, which was not a thing that
we're going to talk about,
right? But when we finally get to where we are now, it is a game that you can both recognize and is completely distinguishable from its roots.
So, I don't want to throw this up to a vote, but we need to throw this up to a vote.
I
Almost
think
at 30
this
minutes.
is going to be a very interesting.
Yeah, we've been on this
30 minutes just on one.
Just on these two games.
Luckily, we knew this was gonna be the long one. So.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna run this in a different order, and I'm gonna throw it to Harrison first.
So
Place your vote and give us why.
Like we talked about earlier, usually I don't really have a lot of time to play games. When I do, it's very rare, and even if I do have a little bit of time, I generally do other things besides playing games. Like, I was so excited for Fire Emblem this year, or last year, and I still haven't beaten it, even though I got it the minute it came out.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, though, I did beat Breath of the Wild twice, and I think that's probably 1 out of 3 games I completed last year, and I did that one 2 times. So my vote is definitely going to go for Breath of the Wild. I do think Red Dead had a better story, but Breath of the Wild was just a better experience for me.
Devin?
This is super difficult. I just like Tim, I'm not really much of a Zelda guy, but my favoritism part is kind of leaning more towards it. I have played more of Breath of the Wild than I have really even considered Red Dead Redemption. If it's say I'm at Walmart and there's a PlayStation 4 that's got Red Dead Redemption on it that you can play the demo of, and then there's a Switch where you can play Breath of the Wild, I'm gonna probably pick Breath of the Wild just out of my own preferences. But with everything that's been said, my vote is still for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, separate from the fact that it's my more what I'm gonna lean toward favoritism wise, and it's just the fact that what was said about Zelda as a franchise having evolved and it just being a bigger deal than Red Dead Redemption. So my vote's for Breath of the Wild.
Okay. I'm really torn here. Like I said, I do appreciate Legend of Zelda and a lot of things that it's done, especially within its sort of genre, and it moving into this sort of new areas that it has. But if I was going to play one of these 2 games, I'm not gonna pick Breath of the Wild. I'm gonna probably play Red Dead Redemption, just because it's more something I would probably be interested in. So I'm gonna have to lay my vote there.
Okay. That's a good, I'm good with that.
Kind of surprised, actually.
Well, I I already went over my vote and why. I think that was how we got this vote started.
Yeah.
The reskinning, while is great if that's what you want on a GTA. Trying to take a formula that wasn't working and revamp it and make it new and make it successful, has my full confidence. So I got to go Breath of the Wild.
So that alleviates me from having to vote. So I'm not going to vote. Anyway, so Breath of the Wild wins. Truthfully, as much as I want to sit and fight for Red Dead, and Red Dead was one of those games for me, kind of like how Breath of the Wild was for Harrison. It was a game I actually was able to complete. Now, it took me almost a year and a half to complete. But that's not because it was that long of a game. It's just I didn't always have time to sit down and play. When I did sit down and play, I played for a little while, did a few missions, and then turned it off.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can count the number of times that you would say, yeah, I'm heading home, probably going to play a little bit of Red Dead.
Yeah, I'm still doing that with Red Dead 2. That game's been out for almost a little over a year now, and I still haven't finished the thing. So, I would have voted for Red Dead because, again, that's my heart would lie, but that still puts Breath of the Wild as the winner. So, with that said, we will deem Breath of the Wild as our winner, and we will move on. Now, this is going to be another large battle.
I don't feel like we'll spend nearly.
Yeah, it's not going to be as large of a battle.
I don't think it's going to be much of as much of a discussion,
especially given the lack of playtime we have on these two games.
I don't know if I can predict this one though. I kind of predicted the last one.
Yeah, this one's going to be harder.
I will say, so in this past week, God of War. I know, none of us have put a lot of time into it, but we've all been kind of blown away by the videos that we've seen and the gameplay. I started looking at a couple of Let's Plays on this game just while I was playing other things, and it was something I could not turn off. And there kept being things that I was seeing that really amazed me, gave me those wide-eye moments. Did that really just happen? And something else that I had read about, even before we got into this, was how satisfying it was while playing the game on, throwing that Leviathan axe and using it. And I will say, I didn't get to push any buttons, but man, was I sitting there like hollering when he would hit some really good throws on that axe. And I'm just sitting there watching it. So that is a game that I have yet to bring up to my wife, but I want to buy a PlayStation just to play it.
Yeah, when God of War first came out, of course, not all of us can go run out and buy a $60 game right when it first comes out. So when it first came out, I did happen to be following a YouTuber who happened to go do a walkthrough of it, a Let's Play style, and I started watching him play it. I did stop watching him play it because of how interested I was within the first, 2 or 3 episodes of what I saw him, and they were hour-long episodes at least. So the first 3 hours of gameplay of the game, I had to stop watching it because I wanted to play through the game myself. So I told myself, I'm not going to watch any more playthroughs until I can get the game and play through it myself. Because I didn't want the story ruined for me. I didn't want the playthrough ruined for me. I wanted to be able to do the playthrough myself. So God of War is one of those that, as fun as it is to watch somebody else, and like you said, to get excited when he makes those throws, I want that excitement for myself to play through. So God of War is one of those games, and again, it's very rare for me to get a game that has that much excitement for me, and God of War was one of them.
So I'm gonna say this. God of War is one of those series that I was never terribly interested in because I like a lot of mythology, but what I've learned over the time of looking into a lot of mythology is Greek mythology is really weird. Mostly not even looking into the different creatures or different gods or just seriously, if you look at a mythological story in Greek mythology, your hero, quote unquote, is the hero because they are powerful in some way. And that's really the only requirement they have. It doesn't matter if what they do is good or bad. They just need to be powerful.
This is very true.
And the bad guy of every story isn't necessarily a person who's doing a bad thing. It's just the person who is opposing who the story is about.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it kind of tweaks a lot of modern day senses of, good and bad guys and protagonists and antagonists. But when you take, that same character from God of War and you move him into Norse mythology, which is, it's a bit more traditional, or at least what we think of as traditional, in form of heroes and villains, because sure the Greek gods aren't necessarily always squeaky clean, but they are generally trying to do things like prevent the world from ending, or at least make things orderly, or encourage people to be braver in the world.
I think that's the big reason why Kratos' character took that turn toward being a guiding father in God of War.
Yeah.
Like, he's not just, man, I'm a BA and I just can't wait to sink my axe into somebody's chest.
Right. I think it really benefits God of War to move from the Greek setting to the Norse setting. So
sure.
in terms of just my interest in history and mythology, I'm really interested in the new direction that God of War is moving. So I mean, that's what I have to say about that.
Well, it's kind of like we were talking about with Breath of the Wild. This new God of War game kind of seems to be a little bit in the same boat as, there's a new direction that they decided to go with this game, and it is paying off, or seemingly it is paying off for the fan base and for people that even weren't really all that interested in the franchise to begin with, now are more interested in it. And God of War is a franchise that I have played through and I enjoyed, but I have new levels of excitement about this one. When it first came out, I was kind of at a point where I was over video games for a minute because my wallet was telling me to be, and my time to consume video games was very limited. So I purposefully looked away while they were, while trailers and everything was going on, because I didn't want to be lured in before I was ready to be. And now here we are at this podcast. We watched all the gameplay trailers and everything, and I am super ready to buy this game.
Well,
and if I didn't have a PlayStation already, I damn sure would be buying a PlayStation at some point,
and
just
here's
so I
the
could play this
thing,
game.
and as long as God of War has been out right now, you can actually pick up even a brand new, because they put it in their greatest hits collection, copy of God of War for about $20, if not less, if you catch it on sale. Like during Christmas and Black Friday, it was $10.
Yeah.
I almost bought it over Black Friday because the PlayStation Network had it on sale for $10.
Right. Well, also, as far as I know, or at least last time I checked, PlayStation has that. I don't know what the service is called, but you pay like $20 a month. It's basically like the Xbox Game Pass or whatever the hell.
I think it's PlayStation Now.
Yeah, that's it. PlayStation Now. I'm pretty sure it has the entire franchise on there.
It does.
And this is
They
just a
also,
plug for
if you have a subscription to the PlayStation Plus, which we've discussed that, they give away games, and the third God of War 3 remastered was given away like 3 or 4 months ago. I have it in my library. It's not downloaded on my system, but it's there.
Right.
Because I knew the new God of War came out, and I'm like, well, let's give it a shot and see what happens. But I have no want to download it, but I have God of War, thanks to Harrison. I have a copy of God of War now that's on getting ready for me to start playing.
Well, the thing about the franchise as a whole for me with God of War is the games are very fun and enjoyable, and they're very like something that I like. You made the comment about Greek mythology, kind of. It's not really the typical good versus bad, but as being a huge wrestling fan, I have very different ideas about good versus bad, and I kind of just like
heel and face.
I like seeing forces pitted against each other either way.
The thing is,
but the franchise isn't really, in my opinion, it is not a must-play franchise. But this game seems like a must-play game.
Yeah. So, we've talked a lot about God of War. We'll have to go up to Sekiro now. I think there's only one of us in this room that's played through it.
Hey, that's me.
That'd be Nick. The game itself, for me, seems super interesting. Like, I would love to play through it.
Yeah.
But it's all about time for me. It's like, do I have time to play through it? Do I really want to get beat up like 18 times for the first level before I actually beat it?
That game is not easy.
No, it doesn't
I mean,
seem like
I think I'm not one to normally get frustrated with games, but lately I've found myself super frustrated with games. Like, I will get to a point and I'll be like, man, this game is just stupid. What am I doing? And I just get set in my ways and play games a certain way, and when they change them, we're gonna bring a sports game into this because I have really hated this game, the new version that I play of this game for a while. It's Madden. Like, I used to be able to pick up a game of Madden, put it on the hardest difficulty, and just walk through a game.
Mm-hmm.
Never have to go through a tutorial to learn how to play. Just kind of, I could pick out plays, learn the plays that work, learn the plays that don't work, when they work, how they work. That's just me. I'm a sports-oriented guy.
With sports games,
Well,
it's kind of
is-
like if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of
Well,
thing.
all of a sudden now-
sports games were very similar to each other from like the 90s to
Like-
well into the 2000s.
Well,
yeah, like 5
so,
years ago is really.
I'm playing Madden
when
19
changes
now,
started happening.
and like half the stuff that I used to do and used to be able to do, which is reading defenses before I snap the ball so I know who to throw the ball to, has completely changed because I swear to God, they made these cornerbacks, and if anybody doesn't know sporting, that's a defensive guy that guards passing. Anyway, they made them like have teleportation powers, because I will throw a ball to a wide open receiver, and by the time the ball gets there, this defensive back has intercepted the ball. I'm like, wait a minute. I shotgunned that ball to him as hard as I could throw it, and in real life, that ball would have threaded its way through before the defenseman had a chance to even think about what was going on. But now all of a sudden, they're not open, they are covered, and they're taking the ball away from me.
I got a question for you then that's actually going to work pretty well with this Sekiro conversation. When you pick up a Madden game and you put it on its hardest difficulty, what are you expecting to get out of that?
Okay.
Somebody to teleport and intercept your ball?
Yes.
Because that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, they're going to make it harder. So it's just made me have to relearn how to play the game, which is fine because I like a challenge. And challenge is not bad in life. Having a challenge in your life is a good thing.
You gotta dedicate yourself to that challenge, though.
Yes, and I don't always have time to dedicate
For
myself
me,
to
there's
it.
a certain quality in games that actually makes me enjoy them more, and that's, am I screaming at this freaking game at some point while I'm playing it? Because if it is, I'm probably gonna love that game forever.
Yeah, and I have a feeling
I
that
have
Sekiro.
toxic relationships
I have a feeling
with
that
video
Sekiro
games.
would be one of those games that I end up yelling at the game
Yeah.
a lot.
I
Which
I've
again,
gone over a lot of psychology studies about challenges and optimal challenges. Generally, an optimal challenge for someone so they can improve and grow in whatever it is that they're doing, it has to be within about 20% of their current skill level, either below or above. And they can use that to learn and grow at whatever it is that they're doing. If a game's difficulty vastly outpaces you, that is not a satisfying experience, and you're not going to be able to learn from it.
right?
So, if you're the kind of gamer that can get into Sekiro, and it's within that 20% challenge level for you, that can be a very rewarding experience.
Yeah, I was about to say that it does not outpace you at an incomprehensible stage that you can keep up with it, but as you're saying that, it is an on-person basis.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's very true.
It's very true.
Yeah.
'Cause I will say that there is a time when playing through the game, and I can't pinpoint exactly when that moment was, at least for me, but when you understand, what the game expects from you to such a degree that you can step up your pace in going through it, not because you know what to expect, but because you know how to handle almost anything fathomable that the game can throw at you. And that's a really rewarding moment when you realize when you get to that.
Yeah.
That's a really cool point that you just made. I
It
enjoyed
is,
the hell
yeah.
out of that.
That was great. Because there is a moment in every game that you all of a sudden just have that light bulb above your head that's like
being able to overcome a challenge that's especially in that upper echelon, that like 20% above you, that you're just like you're struggling, but you finally overcome it. That is probably one of the most rewarding things, not just in video games, but just in anything.
Right, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I felt very proud of myself. Like I said, last night I stayed up until about 3 a.m. playing the Jedi game, and there was a point where I walked straight into 3 giant ass spiders on Kashyyyk at one time, and they were all just coming at me, and I was just like, at first my inclination was to be like, this is bullshit, I'm running away. And then I was just like, no, alright, I guess I gotta just beat this is what the game expects from me right now.
Yep.
Is like, there was absolutely no way that if you walked into this area that you wouldn't have been attacked by all 3 of them at once. And I was just like, okay, this is what we gotta do. And then I beat the game, and I turned it the hell off, or I beat all 3 of them, and I turned it the hell off for the night, because I'm just like, okay, my anxiety is at the level it needs to be, and my accomplishment is made.
That first moment in Sekiro, your first major boss, after fighting, normal dudes walking around with some swords or whatever, your first major boss is this big dude, and I just mean like kind of larger than life dude, sitting on an equivalently sized horse with this huge halberd running at you at giant horse speed, and you're just a dude on the ground.
No,
and you have to trust in your ability.
Yeah.
Not even to dodge out of the way, because that's nigh impossible. But you have to trust in your ability to just deflect his attacks and withstand your ground.
Oh, yeah.
And it's... When you get to the moment when you have those abilities and you trust in yourself to do it and you take him down... Oh, it's so satisfying.
Yeah, you kind of got to have that moment where you think about it and you're just like, okay, if I give up right now and just come back like tomorrow, is it going to be any less hard than it is right now? No, it's not. So just, boss up and play the game. But anyway, I think we've deliberated for a while.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be rather difficult because it's sort of Sekiro is that thing where you can think about overcoming challenges versus God of War, which is just anticipation of just a great game.
Yeah, great content. Yeah.
So we're gonna actually start the voting in a random spot right now because I tried going the opposite way. We still end up in a weird. So we're actually gonna start with Devin.
Okay.
To vote.
Have fun
on this group here.
Well, I was very much leaning towards God of War coming into this episode, but just talking about Sekiro there for that 5-minute point of time.
I did not expect that conversation to go that way.
Me neither. I really didn't, and I don't even know if I have a reason for the game that I'm choosing here. But I'm honestly gonna have to say that just with a massive upset, that Sekiro is kind of just my choice for this tournament right now. Because it's another game just like God of War that I'm very excited to try and play. It's not something I was familiar with at all before, but this is my wheelhouse when it comes to gaming, and I could definitely see myself getting really pissed off and screaming at the game, and I am ready for that. I'm a very toxic person, guys, so my choice is Sekiro.
Alright, we'll go to Tim.
Man, this is actually really tough because, like I said, God of War, moving Kratos into Norse mythology is really exciting for me. But like I said in the last few episodes, Sekiro is definitely a game that I looked at and it made me kind of want to get back into more serious gaming outside of Pokemon. And
all of these games did.
But the thing is, I think Sekiro is doing it more for me than God of War at this moment.
This is absolutely
but the thing is,
amazing.
the thing is, I'm probably gonna end up playing both of these games at some point.
Yeah.
But Sekiro right now is the one I'm more excited for. So I'm gonna have to go with Sekiro.
Wow, that's
not
not
where
I
thought this was
like I said, I was gonna vote for God
I'm
of
gonna
War.
start my vote with "We're not done yet."
We know
So
what you're picking.
I've put a lot of time into Sekiro. I don't own a PlayStation. Norse mythology is what got me into anything fictional ever, based on a few books that I'm not going to get into at this point. So it's a world that I can actually appreciate more than anything from Sekiro. The satisfying times that I've had playing Sekiro, aren't going to be replaced by God of War. God of War is a game where you're running around and you're killing multiples of things with this very satisfying way to do things. Whereas Sekiro, very similar thing can be said for it. So that's not going to be a note for or against it. God of War took what they had and they changed it, and they did it in such a great way. The same way that Breath of the Wild did. From Software took their Soulsborne games and they tried taking it in a different way with Sekiro, and as satisfying as the game was to play, I'm going to say that they failed in that, because there's a lot of people who are dedicated to that series, myself included, who thought that Sekiro was not as good of a game as those games. I'm actually going to vote for God of War on this.
Alright.
Wow.
Simply because I think it has more potential. And I'm not going to let the fact that I haven't played God of War go against it.
All right, we got to fight, boys.
We're going to move to Harrison, because I want to hear Harrison's side of it, because I have a feeling that
This might be a tie.
this might come down to me. So I might actually get a win here, gentlemen.
I've got to say that vote was very surprising to me. I kind of thought we were done at that point.
Like
Yeah.
I said,
I did not
can't
expect
let
Sekiro to
the
come
fact
out
that
swinging.
I haven't played it count against it.
I
can't.
agreed. And it looks like an extremely good game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem for me, though, is I've never played either of these games at all, and it's a really hard decision, but at the end of the day, if I think about it, I know, like, games that I have enjoyed, I know that Sekiro is similar to Dark Souls, and I do love Dark Souls, so I think that I'd probably enjoy playing Sekiro more.
Alright. Well, I guess
So-
we're not getting that tiebreaker.
Not getting that tiebreaker.
I think-
Man, Sekiro
So-
is the
yeah.
upset of this
I'm
entire
gonna have to pick
freaking.
Sekiro.
So, yeah, for just to say my part, I look at both of the games and look at replayability.
Yeah.
We're going to go back over to the other bracket and say replayability on those two games on the other side of the bracket. Could I replay Red Dead? I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could sit and redo it over again. As much as I want to say I want to, I don't think I could, because I lost my save data for that, and I didn't get to see the end of it. I got to the last couple missions but never finished it. I didn't want to have to go through the whole storyline again just to get to the ending.
Yeah.
So I watched the ending. Breath of the Wild, would I play through that a second time? I don't know. I don't know if I would or not.
You should probably
Well,
try it
both of
first
those-
time.
Yeah, you
I should
totally go for
probably
it
try the first time around and see, because I would never know.
The appeal of both of those games, though, being open world, is that you can just screw around. Though.
Right. So
Yeah,
going
you
over
can
to
do it
Sekiro
differently
and God of
every
War,
fucking time.
even though I know Sekiro has already won, I would have voted for God of War, because I have a feeling that I probably would have played God of War twice. Because I would have tried different ways to do things. With Sekiro, you're kind of stuck in a
It's pretty linear.
skill tree for certain skills and attachments to his arms. And,
Oh, it's not that you can't diversify your character.
right.
That's one of the reasons why I think it failed as a From Software game, knowing the Soulsborne series, and how you can really customize your characters, making replayability, a desirable thing.
Right.
Whereas, it's really great your first time through. It's amazing and satisfying, and even New Game Plus, finding the things that you knew were there but you didn't quite get a chance to get to, and having the confidence to do it a second time, I can't compare it. But I don't see myself ever playing it a third time.
Right. So with God of War, and knowing some of the customability of the Leviathan axe and some of the abilities that you can give to his son in the game, his little sidekick guy, I think that maybe trying different routes of going through it would help me want to play it a second time. Makes me want to vote for God of War, even though God of War lost.
Already. Right.
Already. We're okay.
Well,
I'm okay with that. I am
just
okay with
wanna
that
say-
because Sekiro being the underdog in a lot of these,
Yeah.
and
Sekiro was an underdog even making it onto the list.
Yeah,
right.
this
Yeah.
is ridiculous.
Sekiro, like
Sekiro
beating
was a
Last of Us
vote.
and Overwatch.
Well,
was-
truthfully,
it's
Sekiro
crazy.
was a vote that we did just to put Sekiro on the tournament bracket because there was another game that beat it.
Control.
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 The game Control beat it in a number of Game of the Years that at
it
the
had
time.
it had 4 Game of the Years versus Sekiro's 2, but there was also several publications that haven't put out yet, so
Right.
we kind of took a vote.
We kind of took a vote and we put Sekiro on the list. So truthfully, Sekiro being on this list and in this bracket is
Yeah, it was
Alright.
saying
already.
something
It's
for the
just
game
an
itself.
Underdog through and through.
So
I just want to say
I'm
you
okay
guys
with
brought up
Sekiro.
some really good points about replayability.
Well, Yeah.
However, though, that kind of thing really just doesn't matter to me. Replayability is something like if I'm ever gonna replay any of the games on this list, it's not gonna be like a right away kind of thing. It's gonna be like
Yeah.
years.
Oh, no. Well, and
years
then the
later,
other
and,
thing-
and at that point, it's not really gonna matter if the game's the exact same the second.
the
time
other
to
thing
me.
for the two open world games on the other side, the other thing is there are points in the game that are after game.
Yeah.
Just like in the Pokemon games, you have
Yeah.
Post game.
post-game stuff that you can continue to do. Like in the original Red Dead, without spoiling the story, after what happens at the end of the story, you can continue on and still do some of the small side mission stuff that you didn't get through during the story.
Yeah.
So the replayability is not really replayability, it's the ability to continue on after the main story is complete.
Yeah.
That's the
But-
key things
but-
about, for me, open worlds are there are things to do after you beat the game. And the same goes with, like, Grand Theft Auto.
Replayability is also kind of a weird thing because for me, like Sekiro reminds me a lot of the Batman Arkham games, and the Arkham games. It doesn't matter how many times you play them. Batman's always Batman.
Oh yeah, Batman
You know,
is Batman.
his skill set is pretty much the same. You can unlock some abilities at different times if you feel like, because you can purchase them in whatever order.
Right.
But it doesn't change really that much. But I've replayed the Arkham games.
Oh.
I don't even know how many times. Just trying slightly different approaches, or trying to get better times in certain areas, or
Or just
Well, there
to
was
enjoy
parts
the
of
game
there was
again.
parts of Arkham that you and a different Nick, we'll call him Huck for better senses. Eventually, we'll
That's
meet.
what we all call him, anyways.
Eventually, our podcast friends out in the podcast world will eventually meet Huck because he will be on the podcast eventually.
Joel chair breaker.
You guys used to play a section in Arkham. It wasn't the first
we
Arkham.
played
it
we
was
played
the
we
second
played the
Arkham
challenges in Arkham City.
in Arkham City, where
And we did our best to try and make best times in the stealth sections and best scores in the combat sections. And me and him both, granted, it's limited to, because we were on PlayStation, so it was limited to the people on PlayStation, but we made very good scores. We made into, top 5,000s, top 1,000s on certain maps. We spent a lot of time on those games.
Well, Huck was very, very wanting to get the achievement sides of things
Yeah.
completed. I was like million hit combos and
Yes.
stuff like that.
And
when I say million hit, I literally mean
Oh yeah, I've seen
we
some
are.
people
It started.
put
It started
down on
with
that game.
with us trying to in the combats. I'm sorry, in the challenges, trying to get golds on every single thing, and we eventually succeeded. We are gold in every single map in those challenges on Arkham City and Arkham Asylum. And
so here's my real question, though. I know I interrupted you. I apologize, but we do need to move forward. But here's a quick question: if Sekiro were to have put something like those challenges within itself as a game,
to me, it
would
would
that-
have near endless replayability.
Oh, endless. Yeah, I agree.
and would that do something for you? Would that allow Nick over here to want to play more?
Yes. If I could get from, say, point A to point B, unseen within X amount of time, if I could do that and spend 3 or 4 days real time, memorizing every single movement of every enemy in that section, and when I finally do it, a little gold star pops up on the side, I'm there.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Absolutely.
So I mean, maybe for the makers who make the makers of Sekiro, maybe that could be something they could look into.
For the
But-
makers
but
that
I
make
don't
the
think
makers
they're
of
gonna do-
Sekiro.
I mean,
Right.
again, I didn't just do that in the challenge maps. I did that in the actual game too, and I had
Okay.
a blast doing it.
But as a point towards Sekiro for not having those, it does lend something to the game to not corrupting the actual gameplay itself.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's a very beautiful game. And putting that stuff underneath it would do something to possibly even taint the game.
Okay.
So
I see what you're
not
saying.
putting it there does say something.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's because it's a very serene, beautiful game, like a Japanese piece of art.
Okay.
Okay, and putting that into it, I think would taint it. I do.
But
Okay.
you know, I just picture Sekiro as one of those games where I could end up obsessing with it and going through certain sections of the game and going, I could have done that a little bit better,
Yeah.
and wanting to do it over and over and over again.
I already do that. With,
Alright.
I definitely have.
plenty of games, anyways.
Let's move on to our finals. So we are now in the finals. It did take us a while to get there, but I knew it was going to.
I thought we were already in the
I
finals.
thought
I
we were
thought that was our
just kinda
Sekiro
talking
discussion.
We are kind of in.
Yeah,
we are
that could
kind
be
of
our
in that.
Sekiro discussion.
I just kind of wanted to put the people where we are. So, sorry, people out in the podcast world, but let's get into the nitty gritty of this final. We've talked a lot about the Final Four, and we have discussed on topic, off topic. We've gotten into our little tangents about other games, this, that, and the other. So, pitting these two games up against each other, completely different realms, completely different types of games, completely different play styles. An open world versus an adventure game.
The game we expected to win versus the underdog.
Right.
I mean,
I mean, this is like taking.
games in here that I could have been totally like okay with seeing in the finals, and I'm
This
gonna
is
be honest,
literally taking.
Sekiro was not one of the ones I expected.
in a sporting aspect.
And
This
you
is
voted for
literally.
it.
I did. I voted
This
for
is
it all the
literally
way through.
taking the lowest seeded person in a bracket against the number one seeded person in a bracket and putting him into the finals and say, play and see what happens.
Well, and that's why we
The
do things in a
wrestling fan in
bracket
me is
because
going crazy right now.
if you take the number one, we're gonna go back to sports for a second. For me, it's esports, so I get it. But if you take the way teams perform throughout any given season, the number one team from that season so rarely actually wins the title
Oh, yeah.
because that's the great thing about the randomness of brackets like this.
yeah,
in any championship,
any
in
given
any
day.
sporting, in
Any
any
given
sporting
day.
event.
any given day.
I mean-
yeah, exactly.
Okay, for those of you who don't know that we're in St. Louis, the St. Louis Blues just won the freaking Stanley Cup. At halfway through the season of this past Stanley Cup run, they were in last place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They went into the playoffs thinking they were going to knocked out in the first round. They didn't just win the first round; they won the whole freaking Stanley Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were they the best game or the best team of the season? Hell no.
Hell no, they weren't even the best team in. In the
that
bracket.
trophy says otherwise.
Now, through that whole
Right.
bracket from this past Stanley Cup where the Blues won, both number one seeded teams from either side got knocked out within the first two rounds. So that's the brilliance of putting a bracket up here and literally talking about what things are about. So
Okay.
this is why our bracket ends up where it is. It's
Yeah,
because we are
Sekiro
talking about it.
totally
We have
just
people.
ninja'd
but
its
we
way
are-
to the finals.
We have people
which is
talking
very,
about games.
Perfect analogy because it's a ninja game.
So I'm actually going to take us in directly into comparison of these games. We just got done talking a lot about replayability about Sekiro. We have yet to talk about the replayability of Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
So
I'm gonna say that
We're-
Harrison should talk.
we're
about
throwing this ball straight over to Harrison.
Yeah.
Tell us about Mr. I've beat it twice.
I think it does have a lot of replayability because every time you play it, you're probably not going to do anywhere near the same thing that you did last time. Like I said, probably I think in the first episode, if you want to, you can go straight to the final boss. You can fight one boss, all of them, half of them. It's really up to you what you do, and the open world nature of this game and the way that they do things in it makes it to where you could just like go off into the corner of the world and do whatever at any time. And I'd say, like with Super Mario Odyssey, I left that game in my Switch. It hasn't left since I got it. But before that, I did it with Breath of the Wild, where I would just open the game, play with it for a few minutes whenever I had time, enjoy myself, and then I could put it away and not have to worry about it, and then I'll come back. I don't have to sit down for long sessions of the game to play it. And that was really nice, and I think that has to do a lot with replayability, because I wanted to keep playing after I already beat it, which usually, like I said, I don't even have time to beat once most games.
So, question about replayability about Breath of the Wild. Can you play through the game in a different way? Not necessarily in a different order, but say, boss Z, okay? Mm-hmm. Can you beat him with just like swords and an axe in one way, but then just beat him with bombs the next? Or does it kind of still follow that Legend of Zelda rule where you need specific tools for each one?
Yeah, what you get in the dungeon is what you use to beat the dungeon.
Hmm.
So, really, you can do things... there are several different ways you can go about doing things. Like, I know that there's one boss that constantly will shoot a beam at you that will kind of like one-shot you. You can reflect it with your shield if you figure out how to do that, or you can dodge it and hit them like cat and mouse kind of. Yeah, there's several ways to go about doing different things. There's even the dungeons that you have to go through before fighting those bosses. You can kind of break the game. Not really break, because I think they intended for you to be able to do it, but you can kind of just skip like over half of it if you really want to. Like, after you beat one of the bosses, you get the ability to charge up your jump and just kind of go straight up really high in the air and just kind of float. And you can use that whenever and just kind of get anywhere.
I think I've seen similar tactics in the speed runs.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, though, from what I remember, from what I've watched, like, to get to certain bosses, you do have to hit certain things to get into the boss.
Mm-hmm.
But
we'll say checkpoints.
Like you have to gather certain things to even get to the ability to get into a boss, because each boss has its own place that it sits, and to get into that area, you have to have the right equipment to even get in there.
Mm-hmm. That's very Legend of Zelda.
You
Right.
just have to beat the dungeon before you
Right. There
get
is
to
a
the boss.
but again, it's the order of operation. There is no order of operation.
Mm-hmm.
You can, like he said, you can go fight the main boss, and for some reason, I could never pronounce his name correctly, so I'm not even going to try. Ganondorf?
Yep.
Can't pronounce Ganondorf?
Well,
it's not that
You just
hard.
did.
it's the thing is that I always want to call it something else.
What,
Gandalf?
Yes. Okay.
I always
I'm imagining Ganondorf now,
Ganondorf.
where he's like shorter with a
Yeah,
hammer.
just a real
James,
small axe.
James, I can
wizard.
understand where you're coming from, but I'm coming from a slightly different area. I always want to call him Galleon because I'm so into Lunar, and that was the main bad guy in Lunar.
But so yeah, you can go fight Ganondorf right off the bat. You can go pick up the strongest shield in the game right when you come out of I'm going to call it the tutorial section, because there is a section at the very beginning that you have to do certain things before you can come off the main plateau that you're on, because you got to get the glider
Yep.
before you can come off the main plateau. And that's kind of like the tutorial. It tells you how to do everything. It's not a big deal.
Right on.
It's one of those things.
So one thing I actually wanted to ask. So I know that in Breath of the Wild you have the item degradation. Does Sekiro have item degradation?
No.
Well, he only has one weapon throughout the whole
Yeah.
game.
Because that's a big thing for me, because as we've all gone over, I hate item degradation, and
Now-
I'm not the only one.
Now, I'm going to say no asterisks, because, like, your main sword, you can use that infinitely. But your attachments that you have,
Yeah.
aside from just the most basic usage of them, when you're doing the more complicated things with them, they require, I guess you can call it a currency.
Upkeep.
Yeah, well, it's not even upkeep. It's
Like an MP kind of.
It's an item that you can collect from enemies. You can even buy this item from your little
Okay.
Buddha statues and everything.
Mhm.
But basically, it's a and it's an expendable resource that you cannot have an infinite number of on your person. So you
Okay.
do have a limited number of uses of your attachments per, rest.
Whether
So
or
it's
not you
basically
consider that
ammunition.
Yes.
degradation,
You,
though.
you basically have an ammunition sort of
Absolutely.
mechanic.
It's an ammunition, but not degradation.
Which
Okay.
is not necessarily degradation.
So it's kind of like the moves. You can only do your moves so many times in
Right.
in Pokemon.
But- the thing is-
But that's
I can-
also hold
I
on
can-
real quick.
I can-
But that's also not to say you can't collect more of that ammunition
Right.
while you're out and about. So
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah.
So I can
the game
I can
feeds itself.
I can deal with ammunition, because I've dealt with a lot of games that have ammunition, Metroid,
Yeah, well,
and hell, any first
Red
person
Dead
shooter.
Red Dead has an ammunition thing. If you run out
Right.
of certain ammo for a certain weapon, you got to move over to the next one.
Or any game, like any RPG that had MP, if you're just continually going and you don't have access to a tent or an inn, then you had to ration your MP, and that was just something you had to learn how to deal with. That was part of the game, but your magic didn't explode and be unusable. So, and that's kind of my thing, is I don't like item degradation.
Well, and the thing about
And that's Breath of the Wild's big thing.
Breath
Yeah.
of the Wild's item degradation, and this, you could help me out with this, is the item drops are abundant.
Yeah, like it's not really that. To me, it didn't hinder my experience at all because they constantly gave you items whenever you killed anything. You could just
Yeah.
walk and find one laying in the grass.
And were the items basically interchangeable? Like, were they roughly the same as each other?
Some of them were pretty different. Like they had different types. Like they had a bunch of different types of broadswords, short swords, axes, clubs, stuff
shields,
like that. And
bows.
those all played the same way in their class type.
Okay.
And then
So
as you get closer and closer to the final boss, they just do more damage.
Did the item degradation serve a whole lot of point then?
I think it was more
It
of a
just
gimmick.
I
plays
think
to
it was
the
more
the
to change
versatility
up
of
your
the game.
gameplay.
Yeah.
I think it was more of a, it was kind of a gimmicky gameplay type deal. So it just made you have to
So if you wanted to use a club in a certain
strategize a little
section,
different.
but you didn't collect enough clubs, and you ended up breaking your last one, you had to switch up your strategy. That's
Well,
I think that was an intention of developers.
Yeah.
So very, very close to when the game come out, I watched a video that was really talking up the item degradation on, you get to this point and you're trying to beat it with your melee weapons, and then it's breaking, it's not working, and at that point it forces you to use something else like your bombs, and then you find out that this thing was really, really weak to bombs in some way, shape, or form. So it forces you to go through different play styles to find one that works.
okay.
That was something I had seen.
Or
That's
the
not my
game.
interpretation.
Well, but okay, that seems interesting. But
So-
at the same time, you can get similar results from like the Dark Souls
trial
games.
and error.
You can get the similar results from the Souls games where they just the thing you're fighting is it has a weakness. It has an easier way to beat it than probably what you're doing, but you got to figure it out.
Well, I mean, to put your item degradation thoughts at ease here, to me it did not ever seem that in this game the item degradation was a hindrance. It was more of a let's throw this in there as a gimmick to make them have to change some things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
It just adds to the
you
versatility of the game.
it's a lot for those people who are collectors.
Yeah.
They collect certain things in certain games for certain reasons, whatever they feel. Like,
I love cheese wheels.
yeah, for Pokemon, you collect Pokemon for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay, for whatever ability they have, or maybe their type, for using it against other types because of their strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
So you collect certain types of weapons for their uses. You're not constantly using a club as your main weapon all the time. You will constantly switch out weapons depending upon what you're going to use for. If there's a thunderstorm going on, of course you don't want metal weapons because, like we talked about, being struck by lightning. That is an interesting dilemma all in itself. If you have a metal shield and a
that,
metal sword on your back and you're walking around and a lightning storm comes, you will get struck by lightning.
And that is interesting, but I can't see why item degradation is a necessary point.
It may not be necessary. It was just something they put in the game to make it different, to make it better, to make it something different than what you've seen in the Zelda, which, like he was saying before, is it added a component that just made it different from the games that came before.
There are a few weapons I would call overpowered in the game too.
To your guys' credit, I will say that I noticed the people who have put a decent amount of time into playing and watching this are saying it's not a big deal, whereas the people who haven't are saying, man, I really don't want to have to put up with this.
Right.
But we don't have the experience. So.
The thing is,
that's
even
the
the
reason why I asked these questions.
The 45 minutes to an hour that I put into the game, it never once became a thing. It never once. Not once. I mean, my first weapon was a stick. And the first enemy I beat gave me a new weapon.
Well, I mean,
heck, it was a club, but I mean,
Ocarina
a bigger
of Time.
stick.
Ocarina of Time had item degradation for the big Deku sticks or whatever. And I think I'm pretty sure that was one of the only things that actually had item degradation. But I mean, you could break them.
Yeah,
and especially when you were
count
kidling.
the fake Bigoron sword.
Yeah,
you hit one wall with it, you're done.
When you were Kid Link, that was the most powerful thing you had. Was that stupid stick.
Well, they have something similar. The Deku clubs are what the thing is now. But I mean, seriously, I don't want to sit and argue about just item degradation or weapon degradation.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I didn't feel that watching and the little bit of playtime that I played through, I did not feel that the item degradation was a huge factor in the game itself.
Right.
So, we've talked about this item degradation for a minute.
We have.
Hot sec.
Yeah.
I wanna bring up like a point that really it's kind of surprising that it kind of came to my mind so late in the tournament. But like, so what is this tournament about? What are we trying to do here? We're trying to pick the game of the decade. So, without thinking about any of these games specifically, what do you think you need from a game that would be named game of the decade?
For me, length of time.
Length of time spent.
Like not necessarily length of time, but like a game that survives the length of time.
Okay.
Something that gets talked about, that gets played, that gets replayed. Something that has a significant effect on society itself.
Okay, so
we've
that's
got
one
the
thing.
two most recent games on here.
So
We do.
What else
so
do we got?
For me, the game of the decade, because I'm someone who used to be a big gamer and got out of gaming, the game of the decade to me would be, especially since I didn't play a whole lot of games this decade, would be the game that makes me want to play a video game.
Okay.
And something that can do that would be the game of the decade to me.
Okay.
I mean, there are games not in tournament.
Not even looking at this. What makes the game of the decade for you? I
Yeah.
like the way you put that.
Just completely.
Don't stop looking at this.
Stop looking at that. Yeah.
It really, truthfully, for me, it's something that makes me want to just pick it up at any point in time and play it.
Okay, so like an addiction kind of.
Yeah.
Well, not without
that's a good
taking,
way
without
to put it.
taking the.
For
I like
me,
it.
Okay,
the
yeah,
game of the
we
decades.
kind of have to take it to
My
that
game
extreme.
of the decades aren't even on here. They weren't even mentioned.
Yeah,
They weren't even.
and that's
put
why I
into the
wanted.
bracket.
That's
Yeah,
why I
that's not
wanted
the
to
point.
keep the games that are actually in the bracket completely out of it. That's not the point of the question. So
I mean, frankly, if I had to pick the game of the decade, like the one that made the most impact on everybody, I would pick Minecraft as like the game of the decade
Right.
for sure.
Yeah.
and that's
But-
that's
Just
that's
'cause it-
for me. My
Because it
point
hits
is
that number
it's
of people.
impact.
It had the
Impact
greatest
to-
impact.
to
It-
all of
it's still
gamers.
relevant.
Not
It-
just me as
Yeah.
a gamer, but impact to all of gamers is kind of what matters the most. So now my next question is, which one of these games fits that description that we just gave for all those things, and why?
Breath of the Wild probably had the biggest impact.
Right.
Of the two games that are left, I think Breath of the Wild had the biggest impact because even now, to this day, even though it's been 3 years out of its release, there are still people buying it brand new
Yeah.
because it's that game. It's
Yeah.
that one game that was made that people are continually talking about. continually.
I will say
doing
this
things with.
with my description of what I would want from a game of the year, which is just a game that would make me want to play a video game.
Sekiro fits a little bit
Well,
more for me.
But every time I mentioned to someone, it wasn't even just you, James. It was other people too. Every time I mentioned to someone that I just bought a Switch because I want to play Pokemon, they would mention to me that, oh man, Breath of the Wild only costs blah, and I would immediately tune out of the conversation because I don't care. I just do not care. It sparks nothing in me.
Yeah.
And for a long time when I was a gamer, the thing that would make it hard for me to go to bed is that I was thinking about what I can do next in this game, what I can do better in this game. And video games don't do that a lot for me anymore. I think about other things. I think about, reloading and, guns and things like that, and things that I can do to improve those things. Survival skills and junk.
Yes.
But
surviving is junk.
Yeah, basically. But since we started discussing this and I started thinking about video games, I realized that some of the games that I've been that have ticked my brain at least every once in a while I've thought about instead of being asleep. Most of them probably aren't even on this list.
I think we all kind of feel that way.
Yeah,
there's definitely some
to go back
to us.
To go back to the beginning of the very first episode, is that the reason why these games were put on this tournament had nothing to do with our personal opinions of what games should be in this tournament. We went over the first episode, we went over the honorable mentions. Some of the games in the honorable mentions, I think,
more so what we were.
I think are more
those were
deserving of being
games
in this tournament than the people that were in this tournament. Now, we chose the games within this tournament, and we've discussed the games within this tournament from the publications numbers
that chose them.
So,
except
for those
for
of you
Sekiro.
that are going to get mad that we're discussing games that have nothing to do with what's in the tournament right now, you have to understand that we didn't completely choose these games that are in this tournament.
I think the only one we actually specifically chose was Sekiro.
Sekiro, and the rest was kind of just a breakdown of opinions from that point.
Yeah, it was a pure numbers game.
Yeah, it was a pure numbers of publications that chose them as Game of the Year. Now, with that said, we are going to have to wrap this episode up shortly.
Oh, yeah.
So, we have not actually discussed the two games, but we've discussed the two games in previous
I think
bracket settings.
I'm pretty sure we've discussed the two games.
I think for me, the only thing that really needs to be said is that, like, the story here between these two games is one of them is like the genius, the privileged genius that has like a bunch of different playability and a bunch of options and open world and all this stuff versus like the hard-working man that that you just go out there and you play the game and you got to be really freaking good at the game and maybe you won't play it ever again, but once you beat it you'll be really accomplished. So it's kind of like the gifted genius versus the hard-working.
Okay, so now I'm going to
gritty survival guy.
Yeah, that gritty.
I'm going to pit that question out to you guys now. So here's the thing: is I'm going to ask Tim first because Tim I don't think has been asked first for any game. He's always second or third in line to choose. So I need Tim's vote.
Let Devin go last.
I'll go last. That's fine.
I
feel
want
like I always
Tim's
tip
vote
the freaking scale or
I think
something.
you're gonna be the tiebreaker
on which one of these two games left in this bracket system that we have that is to you game of the decade.
Out of these two, it is without a doubt Sekiro. It is the only game out of these two that I actually spend any time thinking about other than how can I avoid a conversation about this game.
Okay? Okay. I mean, and again,
He's being honest.
you are absolutely, and that is why I put this group.
Choice.
That's why I put this group of people together, is because we all have different opinions on different things, and it helps in our discussions of what we do. So now we move over to Nick.
I'm actually more torn on this than I think people realize. Much like the Sekiro God of War vote, where I put my vote toward God of War. I don't know where I'm going with this. Well, I should say I didn't know 15 minutes ago. Between the two, what's game of the decade to me? Something that withstands length of time. Breath of the Wild came out 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Sekiro within months. Just came out just last year. In 5 years, what's going to be getting said?
Oh, man.
Sekiro, man, that From Software, the game that came out where they tried something completely different, it was really, really awesome. I wish they would have done more of that. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Man, they took Zelda in an entirely new direction. There's probably still nothing new, even though it's been 8 years since that came out, and we're still waiting for a second one. Neither of them are, man, I can't stop playing this game. I don't like that. But if I have to put a vote on one of these two, Breath of the Wild is a very large open world game with Legend of Zelda, and they've done it right. Sekiro, From Software game, that is probably the most satisfying game I've played in the past decade. I gotta go with Sekiro.
Alright.
That was not an easy decision to make.
No,
That is actually
I did not know where you were going at any point in time in that. I was like, oh man, this is...
Knowing
dreading
Nick
it
like
now
I know
because I gotta
Nick,
be
that is
last.
actually a very surprising vote for me.
That one's so TV.
Because I know Nick well enough to know that The Legend of Zelda holds a large place in his heart for what it is. So having Sekiro beat Breath of the Wild, to me, is like a wow moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The underdog,
Yeah.
that underdog is still fighting, still swinging. We're two.
So for the first time
Throwing
in this
haymakers.
whole
No kidding.
for the first time in this whole podcast, I actually get to place a vote in the middle, and I actually get to place a vote that actually means something
We saved it for you until now.
until the finals. So here's my thing: is for me, replayability is key to something that makes a game of the decade. Older games that have been replayabilities that just continue to make me want to play games are like Fallout 4. That had a great replayability, but that had a lot to do with after game.
Yeah.
The mods that were done. Stuff like that. Red Dead, for me, was one of those games that had replayability, not just for replayability, just after game stuff that you could continue to play after the main
just
story.
post game, you want to keep going, and
Sekiro has a beginning and it has an end. When it comes to it, you start the game, and when you're finished the game, you're finished the game. There's no continuation. There's no free roam playing around with the game. Breath of the Wild has after game stuff that you can continue to do, and you can continue to find temples that you may have missed throughout the game. And then they had some DLC that came out within the last year or two that added more replayability to it, and it added new things to it. I don't feel that Sekiro is going to have that backing due to the fact that it didn't get the following that I think From Software was looking for. The game itself may be an amazing game to play, but my thing is Breath of the Wild will always have that ability to add things to the world to make it better, to continue to want to play it, to continue to want to turn it on and try something new, to get into the game and say, hey, what if I tried to go do this dungeon a second time around in a different way? Sekiro does have sections where you could go through it and try to do it in a different way and play through it, but again, it has a beginning and an end. With an open world style, that is my thing. I like a more open world style. I feel that Breath of the Wild has a more of a replayability. So Breath of the Wild is my vote because of its replayability. Has nothing to do with the story, has nothing to do with how hard the game was or easy the game was or anything else. It's just the ability to want to jump back into the game and just play it again. So my vote is going to be on Breath of the Wild.
Harrison?
Well, I wish that this was a little bit of a harder decision for me, but
That's
after
alright, I'll take care of that part.
after thinking about all of it, I I know that in my heart probably is Breath of the Wild for me. Breath of the Wild was a great game. I loved it. I think that it's pretty amazing that Nintendo's actually making a Breath of the Wild 2 instead of like just making a different Zelda game, because usually I don't think they've ever actually just made a 2 on a Zelda game before.
No, they've made direct sequels, but not like a 2.
Well, Zelda,
except for Zelda 2.
and the Adventures of Link.
Also, Link Between Worlds is a direct sequel to Link to the Past.
Fun
fact.
Majora's Mask is a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, but it wasn't.
I know.
It wasn't a 2.
Yeah, it wasn't just a.
But it depends on how you're counting.
I say you can
and just because
you can
Nintendo,
talk about semantics all you want, but fact of the matter
and
is,
here's the
That's
thing
what
about
I'm saying.
Nintendo.
It depends on how you're counting.
And
your
here's the
2s.
thing about Nintendo: just because they're making a new Breath of the Wild doesn't mean it's going to be a 2, and it could very well have a completely different name, just like all the other Zeldas did. It could be, Legends of Zelda, blah 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 blah, and not have anything to do, but it is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild.
Legend of Zelda: The Sky is Made of Oranges. The direct
But
sequel to Breath of the
again,
Wild.
just like A Link Between Worlds and all those other games have direct sequels, but they're not. They're just saying that they're gonna make a second Breath of the Wild style game.
all right. So,
Oh, my vote's for Breath of the Wild.
Really,
I'm pretty sure we all knew that.
I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to say. Now the pressure's on big time here.
Oh yeah.
'Cause I think what it really comes down to, before I really go on like a monologue on why I chose what game and what's great about what game and whatnot, is what the question that I posed. What makes it game of the decade? And there's a reason for that. So far, Sekiro has managed to win my favoritism every time it's been up to bat. However, do I think that it has the qualities to make it game of the decade? And this wasn't really all that hard until Nick made his argument, because I have respect for his opinion as a gamer, and then he said that Sekiro is like the most enjoyable game that he's played in a long time, and that makes it really hard. But when it comes down to it, I don't think it is the right game to beat the genius in this circumstance. For me, there's a reason why we all kind of said Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was like the #1 seed. We talked about the fact that he wants it to have be a game that he doesn't want to stop playing, or he's constantly thinking about it. And maybe this isn't the game that he would choose for that, but I feel like a lot of people are thinking exactly that thought about Breath of the Wild. I think that as far as replayability goes, it has nearly infinite replayability. I think talking about impact that it's going to have on gamers as a whole, it's got it fits all the check boxes. So for me, ladies and gentlemen, game of the decade from Untangent Podcast, or Unnecessary Tangent Podcast, sorry I screwed that up, is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So there's our winner, guys.
There's our winner.
I'm still gonna play Sekiro instead.
And I'm still gonna play Sekiro
the thing
instead.
is, though,
honestly,
Tim,
if I'm
the thing
being
is, though,
honest-
Tim, is if you just set your biases aside.
yeah, and that's what I had to
Just
do.
for-
I've attempted to do that throughout this entire bracket.
But Sekiro kept coming through because
It
I
did.
couldn't set
It
my
did.
biases aside.
If Tim were to set his biases aside and pick up Breath of the Wild and just start playing it, I don't know if it would completely change your mind, but it would give you a whole new outlook on what Breath of the Wild is.
It would probably do the exact same thing for me that every other Zelda game has done for me. And I play it, and I go, that was a perfectly fine game. Moving on now.
Doesn't
Moving
feel
on
like
now,
other
yeah.
Zelda games
Well,
to
that's
me.
kind of how like I.
It
doesn't
doesn't
feel
feel
like
like all
other
the other
games
Zelda
anyway.
games.
I'm a one and
definitely
done
does
kinda-
not.
I'll pick it up like 5 years later.
The
and
thing
just
is that
reminisce
if you
and play it again,
take
but-
Breath of the Wild and you start playing it, I'm not going to sit here and try to change your mind because that'll take more time than we have on this podcast.
Yeah, we're already like an hour and a half probably.
So, if you just take Breath of the Wild and play it and forget that it's a Zelda game, and just play it as a standard adventure game, open world adventure style game, and just play it like you would play Fable or Skyrim or even some of the other games that you enjoy playing.
That's the thing is, I didn't like Fable or Skyrim either.
Or play it like you would play one of your Pokemon games. Okay? With just a little different style of gameplay. Final Fantasy X, which I know you rather enjoyed.
Yeah.
Play it like one of those. And just play it and forget that it's a Zelda game. And
Yeah.
forget that you're in that realm of what Zelda is.
I gotta come to Tim's side here. A, you can't play that like Final Fantasy X. Not even close.
Yeah.
No, you're right. But
secondly, at no point in this entire bracket have we tried to persuade somebody's vote. I don't think we should start now.
no,
we're
I'm not
we're
trying.
persuading
This
the
is
vote, 'cause,
after
the
vote.
vote's done.
He's
The
just
vote's
persuading
done.
him to give Legend
Okay,
of Zelda a little
call
bit
it
more
semantics.
of a chance.
I don't care what you call it. At no point have we said, hey man, we all differed from your opinion. Are you sure you don't want to come over to our side? At
You're right.
no point did we ever do
Says
that.
the other guy who also voted for Sekiro.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm gonna
have
to join Tim's side
just-
on this discussion
okay.
because I'm the only motherfucker that voted for the game.
Man,
Okay.
look at those
Well, anyway, we'll leave
Sorry,
that
I
one
just
alone
totally
now.
dropped an F-bomb.
So,
Notice that.
with that said, and our semantics done, and our tangents completed,
Oh yeah.
our game of the year, our game of the decade, with the groups of game of the years that we've had, is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Whee!
Yay! Okay.
Oh wait.
Celebration done.
So now-
before we end the podcast, we should go with the tradition and without the bracket involved at all,
Yeah,
give a game recommendation.
We need to go with recommendations, and I think I would recommend that we do something that wasn't made in the decade.
Or at least not on the bracket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not
Okay.
on the bracket.
Something not on the bracket or not within the decade. We'll
Well,
actually start on the other side of the room.
I was gonna say, I guess you could not count this as on the bracket, but I would recommend playing through the God of War franchise. And sure, that ends with one of the games that's on the bracket, but I think that's a great recommendation.
All right, Tim.
All right. So I mean, during the first episode, I made my argument for I made my statements rather for Mass Effect, and how I was disappointed that Mass Effect 2 didn't make it onto the list because I love the Mass Effect games, and I do. But if I were to choose a game that I would truly recommend to somebody, because it is probably my favorite game of all time, if you can find a copy of any of the Lunar games, any of the Silver Star Lunar games, so Lunar Silver Star on Sega CD, or Lunar Silver Star Story on Sega Saturn, Silver Star Story Complete, which is my favorite one, on the PlayStation, and they did Silver Star Harmony on the PSP, which is a lot easier to find.
You just gotta find
Play-
yourself a PSP.
Play Lunar. Lunar was an amazing game, and I think people need to talk about it more. It was probably one of the best RPGs in my opinion.
All right, Nick.
So I'm going to recommend a game called Inside. A lot of people here may have heard about a game called Limbo. I think it came out somewhere around 10, 12 years ago. It was a side-scroller, mostly black and white. It was basically a puzzle game.
It was. I do remember that. Vaguely remember that game.
Exactly. Inside was also made by the exact same people in a very similar style game. It was a 2D. It wasn't quite black and white, but it had very similar undertones to it. It was dark. It had that ominous feel to it. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I played this entire game in one sitting overnight in the dark, and I was creeped out by morning. But it's a game that it spoke to me really, really hard. As a matter of fact, I bought it for a couple people in the Steam store just so that they could buy it. So yeah, Limbo and Inside. I'm going to recommend both those games together. It's probably about 10 hours total playtime.
All right, Harrison. Recommendations?
I would recommend the Fire Emblem series as a whole. I mean, that's one of my favorite game series of all time.
Very good games.
I'd say start with Awakening or Fate's Birthright, Fire Emblem 6. Any of those games would be a good place to start if you've never played a game like that. If you like Pokemon, there's a good amount of similarities there. I mean, it's more of a tactical RPG, but You can do things with stats kind of similar to like IVs and stuff like that. And it's just a really good game. And also, there are dragons in it. And, you know, there's Dragon Ball Evolution.
Gotta
Right,
get
which also has a game.
It
Which
does
also
have
has a game.
too.
Dragon Ball Evolution. You gotta play the Dragon
on the
Ball
PSP.
Evolution.
And James?
So everybody here likes to pick adventure RPGs, stuff like that. I used to be into adventure games and RPGs and stuff like that. Not so much anymore.
I mean, I picked a side-scrolling puzzle game.
You did pick a side-scrolling puzzle game. I have been and always have been into cars and racing games. So my old game recommendation is if you guys can get a hold of an original copy of Gran Turismo, because that game itself has made me the gamer that I am today when it comes to playing car games or playing games in general. That's what I spent most of my late teens, early 20s playing racing games, and I spent most of my time playing Gran Turismo. Beating the game, make it to 100%, and if anybody's ever played those games, they know how hard it is to 100% Gran Turismo because you have to gold medal the test just to get a driver's license to get to the next style of racing. You had to take these driving tests, and you had to gold medal all your driving tests. Now you could bronze medal just to get into the driving test or to get into the next level, but to 100% the game you had to gold medal it. And I spent lots and lots of time gold medaling driving tests and just beating races and doing my thing. Turismo 1, Turismo 2, and Turismo 3 were games I spent more of my life playing than any other game. So any of the Gran Turismos are my recommendation.
Other than the newest one?
I'm going to leave that one as a blank slate because I was not impressed by the new Gran Turismo. They made it an online thing, and
It's no longer blank. You're talking about it
I know. They just made it. They made it into something it didn't need to be. And we'll leave it at that.
Alright. Hope
So-
you guys enjoyed this feature-length podcast.
Yeah, this is a
Yeah,
very
2
long.
hours.
This is a lot longer of a podcast than I thought it was going to be.
It's going to be a lovely grand finale to...
But it was a very
Three-part game of the decade.
It was a very fun episode for me because we got to bring a guest in. I hope Nick had fun with us discussing games.
Of all the times I've been on a podcast, this is one of them.
You've never been on a podcast before, so boom,
He's never
been on
coming
a
back. We
podcast.
voted off Skyrim.
And
in round
truthfully-
one. He's out.
Truthfully, for those of you who don't know, I don't think any of us in this room has ever been on a podcast, so us being on our own podcast is actually a big thing. So
It's the first time.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed the podcast, like, share, subscribe.
All that jazz.
check us out on Facebook. We do have a Facebook page set up for the
Yeah.
Unnecessary Tangent.
Unnecessary Tangent on YouTube as well. Obviously, you know that because you're listening to this. But
Yep.
you should be subscribed, hopefully, if you're a kind-hearted, great listener like we know you are.
Right,
And
hit that bell so
I
you know
do-
when new ones come out.
I do expect a lot of comments from this last 3 episodes due to our way of voting and what we've done. So please,
Yeah, if you
Let us know what
Please.
you think, even if you're mad at us.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you hated everything that we did, go ahead and let us know.
And on the
yeah,
off chance that you
opinions.
loved everything that we did, also let us know.
yes,
Yes.
very much.
We're not
All right.
holding our breath, though.
so to not have to continue to talk about stuff, we are going to actually say goodbye. So we will talk at you later.
See you later.